The sun was burning high above the dusty square. Mara Quinn was dragged across the ground, her bare feet scraping against the dirt. Two men yanked her by the arms, forcing her to stumble forward. Her white dress, once simple and clean, was torn into filthy rags. Blood smeared her knees, and her face was stray with dirt and sweat. A wooden table stood at the center of the crowd with papers already laid out. Reverend Hale slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "Sign this confession. Admit you called on dark powers." Mara's hand shook violently. "I will not. I heal with herbs. I never cursed anyone." The sheriff, Caleb Pike, leaned in close. His breath smelled of whiskey. "If you refuse, girl, the rope will speak for you." Mara's lips trembled. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I won't curse, only speak." The crowd jeered. Someone threw a rotten apple. Another man spat at her feet. "She brought the fever to our children. She killed the cattle." A woman screamed from the back. "Witch." Hale's eyes gleamed with false righteousness. He pressed the quill into Mara's hand, forcing her fingers around it. Her wrist shook so badly that ink smeared across the page. She dropped the quill, sobbing. "I cannot write lies." That was enough for Pike. "Then let the tree take her." The men dragged Mara toward the riverbank where the old cottonwood tree rose like a gallows. The sun blazed down, merciless and hot. Mara gasped, her lungs burning, her body already battered. They tied thick rope around her waist, pulling it tight until she could hardly breathe. Her arms were bound at the wrist, her legs lashed together, every knot cut into her skin. Her bruises screamed with pain. The men hauled the rope, jerking her upward. Her body bent backward as the rope lifted her waist high against the branch. Her head and arms hung downward. Her hair dangled like a dark curtain over her face. Her feet pointed helplessly toward the dirt below. Mara whimpered, a sound too weak for mercy. No one answered. The crowd had already turned away. Satisfied with their cruel justice, they left her to the burning silence of noon. Swaying slightly with each gust of wind, the cottonwood groaned as if it pied her. Her eyes filled with tears. She thought of the children she had treated, their fevers cooling under her hands. She thought of her mother's songs long ago that promised hope. Now hope was nothing but a dry whisper. Her lips moved, though no one heard her. "I only wanted to heal." The sun scorched her back. Sweat and blood mingled down her skin. She tried to breathe, but every breath was shallow and sharp. Her vision blurred. The sky above her turned white with heat. Her body sagged against the ropes. Still she whispered again, "I won't curse, only speak." But the town had already judged her guilty. There was no mercy in empty streets. No kindness in shuttered windows, just silence. And in that silence, Mara knew the truth. Reverend Hale had feared her herbs 'cause his shelves stood full of medicines no one wanted. Sheriff Pike had feared her healing because the railroad paid him to clear the land. They needed a witch to frighten people away. And so they made her into one. The ceases droned from the tall grass. The river hissed below the bank. The town was gone, but the judgment hung heavy in the air. Mara closed her eyes, surrendering to despair. But in the distance, hooves struck the ground. Slow, heavy, steady. Someone was coming. Was it another enemy, or the only man willing to stand against the lies of an entire town? Eli Barrett pulled his horse to a stop under the cottonwood. The sight before him was enough to cut a man's heart in two. A young woman, barely more than a girl, hung limp from the rope, her body bent like a broken reed. For a moment, Eli just stood there. Jaw tight, chest heavy. Then he stepped forward, grabbed his knife, and sliced the rope clean. Mara collapsed into his arms, light as a feather, yet carrying all the weight of the town's cruelty. He laid her gently across the saddle, mounted up, and rode back toward his ranch. The ride was quiet, but his mind was loud. Why would the town hang a girl in broad daylight and then leave her for dead? By the time he reached his ranch, sweat had soaked his shirt, and her dress was damp with blood and dirt. He carried her inside, placed her on a cot near the fire, and brought a tin cup of water to her lips. At first, she did not stir, then her eyes fluttered open wide and scared. She gasped, pushing his hand away. Eli spoke softly. "You are safe here. Drink." Her throat worked hard as she swallowed the water. Then the tears came. Through cracked lips, she whispered. "They called me a witch. They beat me, dragged me, said I cursed the cattle, but I only tried to heal." Eli leaned back, listening close. Her voice was shaky, but steady enough to hold his attention. She told him how she used herbs to bring down fevers in children, how she ground bark into tea for men coughing their lungs out after long winters, how she refused to take a single coin when families had no money. Eli frowned, rubbing the stubble on his chin. That did not sound like a witch. That sounded like his own mother. He got up and reached for an old leather book that had sat on his shelf for decades. The worn pages smelled of dust and smoke. It was his mother's journal filled with notes on every remedy she had ever used. Eli flipped through the pages. There it was. Sage leaves, willow bark, field thyme. Exactly the same herbs Mara had named. Eli's voice was low but firm. "These are the same cures my mama wrote down. You did nothing wrong." Mara looked at him, eyes wet but filled with a faint spark of hope. For the first time that day, she smiled. Not wide, not bright, but enough to show she still wanted to live. Eli sat back in his chair, the fire crackling, shadows dancing on the walls. He had rescued her from the rope. But he knew in his gut the fight was not over. Because men like Sheriff Pike and Reverend Hale did not let go so easy. And as the night deepened, Eli heard a faint sound outside, the steady crunch of boots on gravel. Someone was coming for her again. But who? Eli rose from his chair, his hand already on the iron at his hip. The sound of boots outside grew louder, crunching steady on the gravel. Then a sharp knock rattled the wooden door. "Open up, Barrett. You're hiding the witch to hand her over before the town burns your ranch to the ground." Eli pulled the door wide open. A tall brute stood there, face mean and twisted, a knife hanging from his belt. The man smirked, eyes sliding past Eli toward the corner where Mara lay weak on the cot. "You have no business keeping her. She belongs on that rope." Eli did not waste words. His Colt was out in a flash, barrel pressed tight against the man's chest. The smirk died quick. "You take one more step onto my land and you will not take another breath." Now get the man froze, his eyes wide, then stumbled back into the night, cursing as he went. Eli shut the door and bolted it. Mara stared at him, her lips parted. "You risked everything for me." Eli looked at her steady as stone. "No, I only risked what was already mine to lose." The ranch was quiet again, only the fire snapping in the hearth. But Eli's mind was not at rest. He knew this was not the end. Sheriff Pike and Reverend Hale would not stop. They would twist the truth until every man, woman, and child in town believed Mara cursed them. He leaned forward, voice low. "If we are going to clear your name, we need proof. Real proof." Later that night, Eli saddled his horse. Mara climbed behind him, clutching the saddle horn, still weak but determined. They rode under the cover of darkness to the prairie wind sharp in their faces. At Pikey's barn, they found the truth. Barrels of feed laced with a strange powder. On a shelf, glass jars filled with arsenic. The poison used to sicken cattle and foul water. Eli's jaw set hard. But the worst came when they crept near the town well. A man bent low, scattering white dust into the water. Eli cocked his gun. "Drop it now." The man froze, caught red-handed. Mara's voice shook with fury. "They blamed me when it was you all along." The man's silence was answer enough. Eli knew they finally had what they needed. And if you're drawn into this story, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because the fight is only just beginning. They had the evidence in their hands, but could they convince an entire town that had already chosen to believe a lie? Morning broke with a hard light over the prairie. The town square was already filling with people, their voices sharp and restless. Reverend Hale stood on a wooden crate, Bible in one hand, spit flying from his lips as he shouted, "This girl brought sickness. She cursed your homes. Today we finish what we started." Sheriff Pike stood beside him, arms crossed, face dark with false authority. Mara was not there, but the crowd believed she soon would be. Then came the sound of hooves. Eli Barrett rode in slow, his frame straightened the saddle. Mara holding tight behind him, all eyes turned as the horse stopped in front of the crate. Eli dismounted and pulled something heavy from his saddle bag. It was a jar of white powder. He set it on the ground for all to see. "This is arsenic, not witchcraft. Poison put into your feed and your water," the crowd murmured, uneasy. Hale raised his voice. "Do not listen. He is blinded by her tricks." But then Eli dragged forward the man they had caught at the well. The man's hands were tied, his head hanging low. Eli's voice was hard as iron. "Tell them what you did." The man stammered, sweat dripping. "I was paid. Pike gave me the jars. Reverend Hale told me what to do." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mara stepped down from the horse, her voice clear, though still weak. "You feared the truth of my cures, so you called me a witch. But it was your greed that poisoned this town." Hale shouted, "Lies." But Eli was not done. He held up a silver coin, dropped it into a bucket filled with water from the well. The coin turned black before their eyes. Women clutched their mouths. Men swore under their breath. The proof was undeniable. Hale's face drained of color. Pike reached for his gun, but Eli was faster. The old rancher's pistol cocked, steady in his hand, daring Pike to draw. The sheriff hesitated. Then two men from the crowd rushed forward, grabbing his arms. "Enough," one of them said. "We see the truth now." The people turned, their eyes burning with anger, no longer at Mara, but at the men who betrayed them. For the first time since the rope cut into her skin, Mara stood tall, free in the eyes of her own town. But Eli knew one thing. A town may turn fast, yet trust is slower to heal. Would they truly stand with her now? Or would whispers of fear rise again when the night grew long? The crowd stood frozen in the square, faces shifting from doubt to shame. The lies of Reverend Hale and Sheriff Pike had fallen apart. Stripped bare in the light of truth, Mara looked at the people who once spat at her feet. Some lowered their eyes, others wiped away tears, too proud to admit they had been fooled. She took a slow breath, her chest still aching, yet her voice rang clear. "I never cursed you. I healed you. And even after what you did, I would do it again." Silence hung heavy until an old woman stepped forward, holding the hand of a boy. His cheeks were pink with health, no longer pale with fever. The woman's voice cracked. "My grandson lives because of herbs. She saved him when no doctor would come." A ripple spread through the crowd, whispers turning into nods. One by one, heads lifted one by one. They saw Mara, not as a witch, but as a healer. Eli stood beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. The sheriff was dragged away, Hale slinking into the shadows with no allies left to shield him. And in that moment, the town shifted. They had nearly killed an innocent woman. Yet, she still chose to stand tall before them. That was courage. Well, that was grace. Eli leaned close and spoke just for her. You are free now. What will you do with it? Mar's eyes shimmered in the sunlight. I will stay. I will heal. If you will stand with me. Eli removed the red scarf from his neck, rough with dust and years, and placed it gently around hers. It was more than cloth. It was a vow. Together they walked from the square side by side, leaving behind fear and lies, and though whispers would linger, though doubt might return, the seed of truth had been planted deep. Some lessons of the West are carved in wood and stone, but others are carved in the hearts of those who choose to stand. What about you? Would you have turned away, or would you have stood beside her when the rope tightened? Would you have chosen fear or chosen truth? Stories like this remind us that justice often hangs by a thread, and sometimes it takes just one hand to cut the rope. If this story touched you, tap like so more folks can hear it. And if you want to ride with us into more Wild West tales, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. Because out here, every story is a lesson, and every lesson is a chance to change. And the question that remains is simple. When the time comes, will you?